This is the last video in my series of how to become a virtual bookkeeper. And in this video, we're going to talk about systems and workflows and everything that kind of goes along with your day-to-day, doing your work, running your business, and anything I can think of to help you in that area. Basically, there's some level of organization or structure you're going to need to run a successful business. And when you work for someone else, I want you to think about it. You know you have to be at work at those specific times, and that has some sort of underlying motivation for you to get up and go to work and be on time. And when you're at work, you've got people around you, and for the most part, you're needing to get work done because you have that level of structure set up by somebody else. Well, when you have your own business, you don't have that same structure. You do have clients, you do have work you need to do, but you have to have some level of organization, structure, and discipline in order to get your work done. Because when you're at home, it's very easy to get lost in doing other things around your house, spending time with your family, turn the TV on, whatever it is that distracts you. It's very easy to do that at home when you don't have people around you, you don't have a set work schedule, and you're basically on your own to structure and organize your time. So the first thing I want to talk about is basically some general organization and time management things that you should know to run a successful remote bookkeeping business. Mainly time management, because that's really important in running a business. For any business, whether it's a bookkeeping business, whether it's something on site, no matter what, as a business owner, you have to be able to manage your time. So I have a couple of recommendations to help you with this. My first recommendation is to have a set work schedule. Now, you don't have to stick to this schedule 100% of the time. You can be a little flexible. That's the whole point of having your own business. But for the most part, you should have some sort of a schedule expectation that you follow on a day-to-day basis. So my work schedule is Monday through Friday from around 8:30 to around 5 or 5:30 in the evening. I'm usually at my desk during those hours. I'm either working on bookkeeping, YouTube, or one of my other businesses that I have. So that's my main work time where I get the most done during those hours. And another thing that I recommend is having task lists. And the reason I recommend that is because it helps you stay on task. When I first started my bookkeeping business, I used to waste a lot of time. First of all, in the mornings, I would have a hard time getting started. And then in between clients, I would work on something and then waste 10 or 15 minutes just kind of sitting there, not really knowing what to do next. So I started setting up task lists, and that helped me tremendously. So the two things I use, first of all, I use a free website called Asana, and you can set up tasks with due dates in this software, and you can even set it up for recurring tasks. So for example, if I have a payroll every week that I have to process, I'll put that payroll task in there for the day of the week that I need to run that payroll, and then I'll set it up to recur every week on that same day. So that's very helpful for me. And then because I already have so many web pages open when I'm doing bookkeeping, I find that I don't like having Asana open all day, every day. So what works for me is on Monday mornings, I'll open up Asana, I'll look at all the tasks I have for the week, and then I'll take a piece of paper, just a regular piece of notebook paper, and I'll write down all the tasks that I have that week divided by client. And then throughout the week, as I perform those tasks, I'll just cross them off. And I keep this piece of paper on top of my desk, on top of everything else, so that if I finish a task, I can look at that piece of paper and it points me right in the direction of what I can do next. I'll just look at it real quick, scan it, and see what I need to do, and start doing that next task right away instead of just sitting there wasting time. Because what used to happen is I would waste so much time during the week in between clients and then in the mornings before even starting on work, that I would end up having to work into the evenings to get things done. And then I would end up having to work Saturdays as well. Well, by being a little more focused during the week, during those hours, I'm able to finish my work by the end of the day and have my evenings and weekends free to do other things. And then the next thing I want to talk about is managing your workload. And what I mean by that is you don't want so many clients that you're not able to get everything done in a particular week, but you obviously probably want enough clients to make the money that you're trying to make to pay your bills. So having the right amount of work and the right client load is going to make a huge difference on whether you can be successful in your business. So you don't want to take on more work than you can handle, because then you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to struggle. Now, you can hire people to help you, and I have done that, but I'm just going to assume in the beginning you're trying to do it yourself before you hire people. So I'm going to talk as if that's the case. And then, of course, like I said, you can hire people as your workload gets bigger and you get more clients, and that will help you manage it. But back to your workload, I like to kind of have an idea of how many hours a week I want to work. And I factor that into how many clients I want to take on. So for example, if you're already working 25 hours a week and you know you don't want to work more than 30 hours a week on average, you're probably not going to take on a client that you need to work 10 hours a week. You get the idea. It really helps to kind of have an idea ahead of time of what client load you want and what's ideal for you. And then what I like to do is keep a spreadsheet, and I'll have a column for each month, and I'll track how many hours I've worked for each client in that given month. So then at the bottom, I've got a total of how many hours I worked that month. And then underneath that, I've got a couple formulas to calculate how many hours on average I'm working per day on bookkeeping and how many hours I'm averaging per week on bookkeeping. So that really helps me keep track of where my time is being used up. And then just a couple of helpful notes in that area. First of all, I want to point out that a lot of times it will take a little more time in the beginning when you first onboard a new client. So you want to allow time for that. I always try to not take on more than one new client at a time, because I wanted to be able to focus on onboarding that client, learning that client before I took on anything else. So you will spend more time on that. And then you'll also spend time for extra projects. So you want to allow time for that. And then year-end taxes, 1099s, anything like that. Just know that a lot of times those are going to take up some extra time. For example, year-end taxes, even if you're not actually doing the tax return, you're still going to have some extra work, because that CPA is going to want extra reports from you. They're going to want extra documents from you, and it is going to take up a little extra time. So make sure in your workload you're allowing extra time for those types of things. Okay, and then next I want to talk about onboarding new clients. You're obviously going to need to have some systems in place for onboarding new clients. When you get a new client, one of the biggest things you're going to need to do is figure out what exact services they need and the pricing. So those are your two main issues with this. Now, for finding out exact services they need, you would probably have an initial meeting with that person and ask them. You could maybe even make a list based on the list of services you have on your website. Make a list of your services and go through and check off whichever ones they need. And then if they need any extra services that are specific to that client that you're going to be providing, you can put that on there as well. And then of course you would set up the pricing for that, which I talked about in video 2. So once you get that established, you're going to want to establish, you're also in that pricing, you're also going to be trying to figure out how many hours a month or a week that you're going to be working on that client, making sure it fits in your schedule, making sure you have the time for it. So all of that is going to be involved. I In my earlier video, I recommended actually looking at their accounting so you can see what is actually involved, how many transactions they have, how messy it is, if it needs cleanup. You're going to be able to look at all of that when you look at their accounting software. And then another thing you're going to need to find out in that initial meeting would be any due dates or timeframes that they actually need the work to be done. For example, they might have a manager's meeting every second Tuesday of the month and they need reports by then. Or they might have payroll that's every Friday and you have to process it by Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So you're going to need to get those initial due dates, initial timeframes in that initial meeting with the client or within the first few meetings with the client. And that's going to help you set up your task lists. It's going to help you know when they expect things to be done, and then you can set up your due dates accordingly. Now, some people don't have their own due dates, but I'm going to talk about that later in the video, that I like to go ahead and set up due dates for everything if I can, just to help me with my workflow. But for the most part, you want to see if they have any expectations of time frames right away. And then what I'm going to do as part of the onboarding process is I'm going to find out if they need any catch-up work or cleanup work. Now, if they need cleanup work, you're going to need to be able to figure out what exactly they need so you can give them some sort of expectation. As far as pricing, you may decide to keep that as a separate price or an hourly rate, but you're going to need to go into their books and see if any cleanup is going to need to be done. And you're also going to need to find out from them if they even want cleanup to be done, because it is going to require a lot of extra work on your part and their part to go through their books and get a lot of extra information. Some things may need to be cleaned up no matter what, like reconciliations, but there's other things that they may not want you to do. I'm going to give you some examples so you can decide, just to help you have an idea of what a cleanup project might look like. So first of all, accounts payable, accounts receivable, you would possibly go in and look at all of the vendor bills outstanding and customer invoices outstanding and find out, especially some of the older ones, if they need to be written off, if they're no longer valid or anything like that. So accounts payable, accounts receivable, and then maybe a payroll liabilities, go through and make sure those look correct. Those don't have any obvious errors. And then you would maybe look at the chart of accounts to see if it needs to be cleaned up or updated. Look at their products and services list. There might be some unused products and services on there that maybe you could make inactive or remove. Undeposited funds, make sure there's no outstanding deposits that maybe didn't get deposited or are invalid. And then, of course, reconciliations, any reconciliations with errors, just stuff like that. So those would be the types of things that you would probably look at if you were going to do a cleanup job. A catch-up job is much easier because you're not cleaning up a mess. You're basically just entering transactions and doing reconciliations to get them caught up. So that's a little bit easier, a little bit more manageable. And then once you determine what work needs to be done, what duties you're going to be performing, what tasks you're going to be performing, then you would write up some sort of client agreement to basically state what work you're going to be doing, your contact information, maybe some general terms and conditions, things like communication, billing. You might have something about billing on there. And then, of course, pricing is probably going to go on your client agreement as well. So you can look for samples online, or you can just kind of create something. I would recommend just keeping it simple and professional. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the day-to-day workflow. So it kind of goes along with time management a little bit. You're going to want to be able to manage your time during the day and make sure you're getting the work done that needs to be done. Like I said, when I'm onboarding new clients, I like to go ahead and get due dates, and I'm already setting up my tasks. Assuming they say, yes, I want you to work for me, I'm already setting up tasks in Asana and trying to figure out my day-to-day workflow for that client. And Like I said, I set up for tasks for everything month, but usually the biggest thing I do for a client is the month end, what I call a month end close. And to me, a month end close is entering the transactions for the month, entering any adjusting entries, payroll entries, anything else that needs to be entered for the month. If there's anything client specific, like a trust reconciliation, I would include that. That would be part of my month end close. And then reconciling accounts, all the bank accounts, credit card accounts, and then sending the reports to the client. And the reports I send are usually the profit and loss for just that month, the balance sheet ending at the last day of the month, and a profit and loss by month, divided by month, year to date. So those are usually the 3 reports, unless there's some specific report for that client. So I usually try to get all my month-end closes done by the 15th of the following month. So for June closes, I'm trying to get them done by July 15th and reports sent to the client by July 15th. Now, some clients are different. I've got some that might need them done by the 10th, and I've got some bigger clients that might need them done by the 20th. And so it really varies depending on the situation. But for the most part, most of the time, I'm getting them mostly done by the 15th. And then other things like payroll, paying bills, those things happen on bi-weekly, weekly, or bi-monthly basis, just depending on the client. So obviously the first half of my month is going to be a lot busier because I'm doing a lot of those month-end closes, things like payroll and paying bills and other tasks. Those usually don't take as long. So my second half of the month is usually a lot less. I'm usually not nearly as busy. So that's when I'll do things like I'll try to start entering transactions for the current month. Some clients I like to go in and enter transactions on a weekly basis, just so my next month isn't as overwhelming. So the second half of the month, I'm usually trying to work on projects, do my weekly and bi-weekly tasks, and start entering as many transactions as I can for the current month. So that's kind of how my workflow goes. And then if I have any dentist appointments, doctor appointments, or any other type of appointments outside of work, I try to schedule those for the second half of the month. Between the 20th and the 30th is usually a good time for me to have free time to make appointments, go on trips, things like that. So that's kind of how I manage my work. So basically that's pretty much it. As you can see, being organized is extremely helpful in something like accounting. You don't want to be missing tasks, like you don't want to miss someone's payroll. So it's extremely important to have this stuff organized and set up and structured to some extent. But if you have any questions about any of my videos, please feel free to comment on them. I hope you found this series helpful, and I hope it gave you enough information so that you can either decide whether you want to be a virtual bookkeeper, or maybe you already got started and you were just missing some pieces or missing some information. So hope you found it helpful, and thanks for watching.